Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. You are here on the Teacher to Teacher special education page to hear us talk about remote IEP meetings, which I think a lot of you are probably doing today, or not today, but in the real world, real life right now. I'm Amanda Morin. I'm a senior expert in family advocacy and education at understood.org. I'm also a former teacher and early intervention specialist. And somebody else put this slide together and told you that I'm an author of a number of books. And I'm here with Lauren Jewett, and I want Lauren to really tell you more about herself. So Lauren, thanks for joining us, everybody. And make sure to introduce yourself in the comments and ask us questions as you have them.
Hi, my name is Lauren Jewett, and I teach special education in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I teach 3rd and 4th grade special ed currently, and I've worked with every grade, kindergarten through 5th grade. I'm a national board certified teacher in exceptional needs, and I'm currently serving as an Understood Teacher Fellow this year, so I'm really proud to work with understood.org and share the great resources that they have and also contribute.
And Lauren, you've been doing office hours on this group too, is that right?
Yes, I'm doing office hours with a number of other teacher leaders.
So you may have seen Lauren about answering questions, and if you have more questions today, let us know. I'm going to give everybody a quick note that I have construction going on outside my house, so we're just going to roll like we would if we were doing a lesson plan that didn't go as typical. Again, thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about preparing for, participating in, and managing remote IEP meetings, which a lot of us are trying to do right now. So, Lauren, you ready to get started?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm actually just going to tell you quickly about Understood because I forgot that this slide was in here. Understood is a program where we work with both families and educators, and specifically educators. We're working to make sure that you have the most up-to-date, informative, actionable information to really make a difference in the lives of students with disabilities. Lauren, as she mentioned, is one of our teacher fellows. We have a teacher fellow program where we have 13 teacher fellows from all across the nation, amazing people who do amazing things, who really, like, just reading their bios makes me exhausted because they're doing such advocacy and good work in the classroom. And they're helping us every day to make sure that the information we're putting out there is really useful and relevant to the lives of teachers on the ground. And why I'm so excited that Lauren's here today is because she wrote about this for us. Lauren, do you want to tell us a little bit about this article?
Sure. So one of the things that we get to do as teacher fellows is sometimes we review content, but we also get to contribute to content. And so one of the pieces that I was scheduled to work on prior to COVID was a piece about how I collaborate with my team, collaborate with co-teachers, and we were gonna launch that like early in the next school year. But then obviously a lot of things shifted, and the editing team mentioned, hey, we know you have been talking about holding IEPs in this virtual setting. So I ended up shifting gears and I wrote this piece about how I have been leading and facilitating the remote IEP process, given that we have school closures. So I'm really proud to share some of the ideas and tips that I shared in my article.
Which is great. And again, if you have questions, make sure to drop them in the chat and we will try and get to them as we can. Let's dive in because I think a lot of people are sort of trying to figure out this new COVID learning world where we're doing IEPs and providing services from a distance. And it's a really tricky thing. I'm going to mention too that I'm a parent of 3 children, 2 of whom have IEPs. I just participated in my own first virtual IEP meeting. It was my son's triennial review, which was really an unusual experience. So I'm so glad to be able to talk about this from all of the different perspectives today. And it really went smoothly and I was really pleased. And then when I talked to Lauren and Lauren said, yeah, we can make this work. We're going to make remote IEP meetings work. So we decided to share some of those tips with you today. And if you have tips for us, make sure to share them as well. So let's jump in. What we're going to cover today is preparing. Lauren, do you want to talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Sure. Preparing the prior to the meeting, everything that you would be doing in this new setting and the new realities, the steps you would take to get ready.
And is that just for you, or is it for families as well, do you think?
For myself and for the families,
Yeah,
yes. It's a
definitely.
holistic thing, and taking the pieces that you would have done in a physical setting and bringing them into the setting.
We're also going to talk about the participation, which I think is huge. Participation is the biggest part right now that we're all trying to sort out.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about how you write goals, and that's kind of really different right now. The writing of the goals isn't different, but the covering of goals is a little bit different. So Lauren has some great thoughts on that. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We're also going to talk about something called remote learning plans, which some of you may be using right now. Some states are and some are not. And we can talk a little bit about how those go into an IEP and how they fit into a remote IEP meeting. And then we'll have some Q&A, and we can do that throughout this whole thing too. So I'm just going to do the quick, if you're just joining us, we're just getting started. So you're here at the perfect time. So we would love a little feedback from you and to know if you've participated in a remote IEP meeting yet, what went well, what thing posed a challenge. We're going to take just a minute and see if you have anything that you want to share with us. Lauren, what went well for you? What was the one thing that you would say went well?
I would say the one thing that went well was that everyone was able to log into the call, and everyone was participating. And that was like one of my fears, is that like I was gonna have a lot of tech issues, but I think I held the meetings at my first meeting at a point where we had been like 2 weeks into everything, so people felt a little bit more comfortable. I think if I had one that was scheduled the first week we were out, and we ended up rescheduling that one, just given everybody's mindset. So I think that was something that went pretty well.
Yeah. And for us, that's what went well too, is everybody was able to show up. They were able to be there. They were able to participate as they expected. One of the things that was a challenge in the meeting that I participated in remotely was people had varying levels of understanding of the tech. So it's very different, right? When you're remote, it's very different to sort of see when people are trying to talk or to see their body language. And so there was a lot of sort of, are you talking? Are you not talking? Wait, who's talking now? Kind of stuff. That was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
So if you please feel free as you think of them to drop in any of your challenges or questions that you may have. But I think we'll keep moving on and talk about things that are less challenging. So let's talk about what it's like to prepare for a remote IEP meeting.
Yeah. So one of the things I mentioned in my article was that I have to consider new realities as I schedule these IEP meetings. You know, I am trying to rely as much as I can on my past experience and systems. So, my team at my school, we had over 30 IEPs scheduled or left to hold, between March and middle of May, because we're ending actually next week. And so we've actually held over half of those, and we've gotten a lot of them scheduled. So, it's just, I want to make sure I'm relying on those past experiences I've had in terms of honoring the rights of my students and families, as well as hearing from all participants on the team, making sure that we're transparent. And some of the new realities, though, is, you need to find a time that is mutually agreed upon with everybody. Obviously, that happens when you're meeting at school, but right now, everyone is moving at various points, like during the day. There's parents who are teachers are working from home. Students' parents may be essential workers. They may not have a reliable schedule that you can be predictable on. So I think just understanding everybody's new demands when scheduling, it's not like I have a common planning time. I can't be like, okay, we're holding it at the 9 o'clock planning time, for fourth grade.
You can't walk down the hallway and check in with people on their schedules at the moment either. You can't just sort of walk down the hallway,
Yeah, it's a lot more coordinating.
Yeah. Jane Phillips mentioned to us that she's done three 3 IEP meetings right now, and the parents were thrilled to stay home and attend virtually, which I completely understand. I think that, there's something amazing about being able to go to an IEP meeting without my shoes on. I thought that was amazing. I actually think that was the first time I'd ever done an IEP meeting without shoes on. And she actually said that they included a Spanish interpreter with no challenges, which is tremendous. Lauren, I think speaking to those new realities is so important. I really love that you bring up the fact that there are parents who are sort of frontline healthcare workers too, who may not be able to participate. I'm also amazed that you've done half of 30 right now. That's like tremendous.
Right. And those are all mine, but like I'm saying, as a team,
Right.
we've really rallied to get these, accomplished as best as possible.
So I'm assuming, communication with families is a little bit different right now, right? And I think as we sit here and we do this virtually for all of you out on the internet, and we don't see you, but we know you're there. Um, I'm really conscious of the fact of the equity issues, and I'm realizing that I'm sitting here. I have the ability to do this live, to have a computer in front of me, to have the tech, and to make sure that I have the access. But I would assume that we know that there are families who don't, and so I think that's one thing that we really want to make sure of before you even have the meeting is to make sure that the families have internet and phone access and know how to work the tech. Lauren, how are you having those conversations with families?
Well, first of all, when I reach out to the family, I usually gonna, ask them, hey, the annual is coming up. And, obviously we're in this situation, we want to hold it. Where do your thoughts lie on it? And once we do have agreed upon time, I try to make sure that that time not only works for the parent, but then works for all of my other team
Right.
members. And uh, the that it might be a situation, and I tell them, hey, we want to do it over the computer. Would that work for you? And I explain, we do ours over Google Hangouts, but I know that some districts do different things based on their restrictions. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's Skype, whatever. And I will say that IDEA prior to COVID has always allowed alternate means of participation. I mean, that is written into the law. So, I've had to hold some IEPs back at school. Like we've held them over the phone before.
Right. Right.
Not ideal, and we try to get the parent in. However, if that is a situation, usually we do try to send the materials so they have something to look at. In this situation, it is slightly harder, depending on, again, privacy and being able to send things over an email, if that's something that the parent has or doesn't have, or if you can mail it in the snail mail. But maybe it's even like you have a Word doc with just the notes of like the things y'all are thinking about as a team, and then you can screenshot that to a parent. There's lots of different ways to kind of navigate it if the parent is not going to be able to see and participate via a screen where they're actually seeing.
Yeah, and I think I would jump in and say too that what we note here that sending out instructions if necessary, and some of that's about the instructions of how to access the tech. It's also instructions around knowing what your privacy rights are, knowing what kind of reports are going to be shared, and those kinds of things. And then meeting norms. And Jane is asking the question about like meeting norms for virtual meetings. We do a lot of meeting norms in regular meetings to remind people of privacy and those kinds of things. But when you're doing things virtually, it's a little bit different, right? So meeting norms change a little bit, not from a privacy perspective, because I think that's always a meeting norm. And in fact, I think it's something that we're always making sure to tell people, even through video, the privacy rights still apply and all those kinds of things. But there are other meeting norms too, because not all video platforms are equal, right? So the ability to let people know, how are we going to communicate? How are we going to talk during the meeting? So for example, this is the agenda. We're going to start with the teacher reports. We're going to ask parents for any concerns. We're going to go through any goals and those kinds of things so that they know what the agenda is ahead of time. But also to be able to say, here's the norm for if you need to get attention and you want to speak up, it's either you unmute yourself and you just start speaking, or it's you raise your hand so everybody can see it in the video. Or if you're using one of the platforms that has the ability to actually raise a hand, to make sure that people know sort of how you're going to acknowledge everybody's ability to participate in the meeting. I think there's also this meeting norms in virtual meetings change a little bit too, in terms of just making sure everybody knows if they're not talking, they need to be on mute, but they probably should find a place where they can be as quiet and private as possible. I will tell you, as a parent, I didn't think of that, and then realized halfway through I had to shoo my 10-year-old from where he was behind us. But I also think that brings to mind a really interesting norm that I would have set if I were starting an IEP meeting, which is making sure, and this should probably always be the case, right? Making sure that you don't say anything that you wouldn't want a child to overhear. Like we always think of that, but I think it's particularly important in a virtual setting to realize that sometimes people are right on top of each other. And we need to be really cautious of how we talk about strengths and challenges in kids, because that's happening right in front of them in some ways. So those are some of the additional norms that come to mind. Or are there other ones that come to mind for you?
I just wanted to add to what you were saying. So, like, I always use an agenda in my meetings, regardless of if we're having a school closure or not. I always have the kid picture on the agenda. It keeps it student centered. It keeps it focused on the student. And I think having kind of just a quick, 1 minute is like Amanda was saying, these are the things we're going to go over. It just helps. And if you're even going to tell that to the parent, prior to the meeting and just say, hey, this is how it's going to be. This is about how long it's going to take. It can ease some anxieties because we know people are in like a heightened sense of anxiety right now and just uncertainties about, everything. So I think that that's a good tip. And then I've actually, in two of my meetings, like two of the kids popped on the call with the parent, which like is really neat because that doesn't always get to happen during the school day because a lot of times they might be in their specials class. They don't want to necessarily come to their meeting, and so they weren't there for the whole meeting, but they got to pop in and see, oh my God, all these teachers are talking about me with my parent, which can just be really uplifting, I think, at this time for them.
Yeah, and I will just note really quickly that we were talking about an accommodation for my son, and one of the teachers just said, "Why don't we just ask him?" And he came running in, and it was really helpful to have him be able to answer that. That's a great point. I just think that student centric. I think it makes us have to think about being really student focused in ways that we try to be, but need to be even more now. Um, so I think you talked about this a little bit, Lauren, that you said you're using Google Meet, and all districts are using sort of different things. So, but using the platform that allows for screen sharing or video can be super helpful. Having a note taker is another one of those norms that you may want to think about. Somebody specifically who's capturing these complexities. There are also things that you can do. There are transcriptions. Engines that you can sort of build in, things like otter.ai, where it will transcribe live what is happening. So if the note taker misses something, you can go back and look at the transcription. That has been super helpful to me to have as a tool. Meeting with a translator and having that translator available if necessary. Juliana, one of our other teacher fellows, who is also in the group and doing some moderation and office hours, put in a really great post the other day I saw about translation and how she's working with translators. And we'll try and find that and pin it to the chat at some point. But I also think that I would mention screen sharing can be complicated. Lauren, have you come across where screen sharing can get in the way of having a meeting? And if you haven't, that's okay too. I just wanted.
I haven't in the meetings that I've either facilitated or participated in, particularly. I think one thing is that if you're sharing a document, you do need to realize like sometimes you need to zoom in pretty like big because sometimes like the text can be really small. And just like being mindful of telling like people what page number you're on if they're, have the document themselves, so that you're just kind of, being cognizant of that. And the point about the note taker is like we always, again, some of these tips that I offered in my article, I've held like over 100 IEPs in my career, almost like somewhere between 100 and 200. I lose count, but I've brought those pieces and elements into the virtual space, which has helped me because then I'm like, okay, I'm not starting from scratch. Like, how can I rely on my experience? Like, I know how to do this. I'm just doing some things differently. So the note taker piece has been helpful because my special ed coordinator, she will just type the notes. And sometimes if she has to maybe log on, maybe she has kids too, so she's had to log onto the call late or anything like that. I've started the notes for my coworker or vice versa. And it does help too if there's any tech issues, because then you have some notes to kind of also, rely back on for people who may have missed pieces.
Definitely. And I think I would just note, like, one thing about screen sharing that can be complicated is you can't always see the rest of the team when you have screen sharing going. And if you have parents or even teachers who are participating on mobile, it's very hard sometimes to manage that and do the screen sharing at the same time. I think I also just wanted to mention that Google Meet is an interesting one because sometimes Google Meet is one of those platforms where the person pops up as they're talking, right? So you see like these squares and stuff like that. I did find a plugin that works with Chrome called Google Meet Grid View, which you can download as a plugin extension for Chrome, and then you can make everything look like a Brady Bunch boxes like you can in Zoom too. So that's a super duper tip if you are somebody who has trouble sort of tracking, or if you have a parent who might have trouble tracking that too. You may want to mention to them that this Google Meet Grid exists. It was something that I just loved finding. Please make sure to keep asking questions if you have them. I'm loving seeing these comments kind of roll through. It's great. So this is another piece that we have understood, and we have a great editor who also happens to be an attorney, and he's fantastic. He did it with the National Center for Learning Disabilities, did a sort of a Q&A around special education and coronavirus legal FAQs about IEPs. And one of the things that I really want to make sure to note, and I know this is something that's all top of mind for everybody, is privacy and confidentiality practices. It's one of the reasons some districts are using different video platforms for IEPs than others because there are different confidentiality kinds of things. The one thing I want to make sure to note is transcription is one thing, but recording meetings, we think that it seems like a really good idea, but the recording restrictions that would apply in your state at any time still apply, and apply probably even more so when it comes to recording video meetings. So it's totally worthwhile to check in with your special ed coordinator, special education administrator, and ask what the recording policies are right now to consider that privacy and confidentiality. FERPA still applies in all of these. One of the things that I would say I would also mention to people is if you're using email, double check that people are okay, all the parents and stuff are okay with having them CC'd instead of BCC'd, because sometimes people do not like their email addresses available, especially if you have outside providers. Not that they don't want to be found, right? It's not that. It's just that those email addresses, private email addresses, are different than school email addresses. So liberally use your BCC button if you can, and just let people know that if they reply all, they're not going. They won't have to add people back in. Those just and there are many more other legal guidance around sex education right now, but there's a lot more that we don't know than we do know, and so we're just all trying to figure it out at the same time. Andrew Lee, our attorney slash editor at Understood, is doing a really good job of keeping us updated as there's much more information available. I'm going to take a pause because I feel like I just talked for a long time. Lauren, tell me if you have something. Just interrupt me at any time if you have things to add, please.
Nothing to add about the privacy.
So let's move on and see what tips other people out there have for preparing for IEP, remote IEP meetings. We'll take a pause. I was saying earlier to Lauren that this is where I feel like I sing the Jeopardy theme song to make sure that you all have enough time. We'll keep an eye on the comments and see if you have tips that come up for preparing. But in the meantime, let's talk about participation. And Lauren, you really got into this in your article and did a really great job. So I would love for you to sort of expand on this.
Yeah. So something that I always tell team members and parents during a meeting is that the plan that we're coming up with is a living, breathing document, right? And it's meant to change and adapt with the student. And so the parent can always request, to come back to the table, and we can, have different conversations about something that might not be working, or maybe the kid doesn't need a certain support. And so I think that is a very important piece right now to be mindful of, is that needs might change. And something that has been really interesting for me to think about as I prepare for IEPs, I know we're moving into the participation part, but as I talk to team members and I talk to parents, I ask them, okay, well, are there any things that new that you're noticing right now, given that, we've been away from school, any like strengths that have emerged for your student, anything that they are now struggling with that they weren't struggling with. So, because that'll be helpful as you prepare to maybe write your goals and just write information into general information about the student on the plan. So yeah, I think that is definitely a piece that I try to keep in mind.
I love that you start with, what are the strengths you've noticed? I think that's such like a great place to come from is what have you noticed that's really successful for your child at home is such a great question. I love that that's where you start. I just wanted to note that. I think it's so, so important that I think we're all in a place right now where it's really easy to see the challenges, but I think to like reframe that and think about like what are the opportunities, what are the strengths is fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I love this part of I love this. Yeah.
Yeah, so just valuing the team members. So at the beginning and the end of the meeting, just telling everybody that you appreciate the time that they're taking out. I mean, this is a good best practice
Right.
anyway, but I think right now everyone's time is, even though it's like everyone's saying, "Oh, we have all this time." I mean, as a teacher, I totally don't feel like that. I feel like I've been working, 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 and I think time is limited right now. Everyone has different responsibilities and demands. And we may be able to see that from like our computer screens, and we may not. And so just appreciating like, hey, I'm really glad that you were able to take and set aside this time so we could have this meeting about your student or your child. And then closing the meeting with that. Because again, it's starting the meeting off on a positive note and ending on a positive note. And either strengthening or continuing to build that relationship with your um,
I love the tip about asking participants to state their name prior to speaking. It can always feel kind of awkward to say, well, this is Amanda again, but I think it's worthwhile. It's absolutely, especially if you have somebody who's not participating on video.
yeah.
It is such a good tip, Lauren. I just like it didn't even occur to me until I saw you write this and I went, of course, that makes so much sense. Because there are plenty of times where I'm in meetings and thinking, I'm not sure who that is who's talking, and I don't want to interrupt to ask that question. So to just make that part of your meeting norms, to say, even if
Yeah.
it feels silly to you, just give us your name again as
Right.
you're gonna speak.
Yeah. And we don't do it at school, but I'm like, maybe we need to have like little name tents or something with people's positions, because I like some teams are very big. If a student has like occupational therapy and speech and counseling, and you've got like two gen ed teachers there, like depending on, what grade they're in, we departmentalize in our elementary, some of our subjects. So it's like some of our teams are, a couple of people, but some of them, can
They're
be 10
big.
to 12 people. So, just I think it just helps because again, people don't have a lot of bandwidth right now. So I think like as much supports as you can give, the better. Um,
Yeah.
and then I already kind of spoke about seeking the input from everybody, and talking about, hey, what are some like, that, obviously talking about the things you normally would talk about in IEP, but specific to this situation, like what are things you're noticing at
Yeah.
home? Like I've made a point to ask those questions, like, hey, we noticed, this student was having a lot of trouble like with coping in school. Like how is it going right now being out of school? Just seeing like that, how is that shift, and how is the student generalizing to a different setting?
We got a great comment come in too that said that somebody's colleague has put together a Google form questionnaire for parents and students to complete before their virtual IEP meetings. I love that. It's such a great idea. because it takes them out of the spotlight a little bit, right? So you have that information ahead of time. You have the ability to ask those questions when they're not feeling pressured and on video and in all these places. Such a great tip. I love that idea. Creating a Google form questionnaire for parents and students to complete individually. And I love the idea of having one for parents and one for students. I think that's really neat too. So thank you for sharing that, Jane. That's a great tip. I love that.
Yeah, I might use that.
I know, right? And I think, as we're doing here, like using the chat feature for input and questions is fantastic. This ability to have the chat open and available, and we're learning from you. And I think it's the same thing we can do when we're engaging team members. Um, I do think it's important to remind team members that everyone can see the chat box. Not that anybody's going to say anything inappropriate, because I know you're all professionals, but sometimes I think it's worth noting that everybody's going to see it. So if I wanted to say to Lauren, "Oh, Lauren, I forgot to mention this part," I need to know that everybody's going to be able to see that chat box if I say that. Um, this one's really interesting, making sure that documents can be seen by team members. And Lauren spoke a little bit about like that zooming in so you can visually see it. But I think sometimes too, we need to think about, as you had said before, Lauren, like making sure that those documents are out ahead of time, right? And that's not a typical thing that we would do, right? In IEP meetings, typically the teacher report happens at the IEP meeting. And it's something that parents maybe see after or during the IEP meeting. And right now, it's one of those times where we may need to think about, if parents aren't able to see on the screen what we're sharing or process that information auditorily, because there are some parents that's really hard for, right? It's really hard to hear somebody read it and then keep that information in mind. It may be worthwhile to make sure that your team members are filling out the teacher report a little bit ahead of time and having that ability to send it to a parent. Um, and that's, I mean, I know that's extra work, and I know that we don't have a lot of extra time, we don't feel like it, but it may be worthwhile. Um, you've been doing amendments too. This is a really interesting point, I think, that I want you to speak more to, these amendments right now and how you yeah.
Yeah. So like amendments to the plan regarding remote learning changes. So I'll talk a little bit about this when we get into the writing the goals, but having like when we started out with our distance learning situation, we had to contact all of our families and kind of just say like, these are the things that we are providing in this moment. We gave a lot of packets to the kids to start off with, and then moved into some online learning, but explaining like, hey, our school day is normally 8 hours or however long it is, and if I give 60-75 minutes to your kid a day, like that's going to look different in this setting, and it doesn't mean that we are not adjusting the goal, but like the Google Hangout may not be that length of time. We're doing our best to still service all of the goals, and provide the materials that work best for you and your situation, provide just like a range of options. And I think that I've seen so much. I'm a big proponent of social emotional learning, so I think in this also I've seen a lot of things out there about how less is more right now, and I've been trying to be very mindful too about bombarding and overwhelming the kids and the families. I've actually had specific situations where kids have had family members that have passed away, and so like that, you have to be very sensitive and compassionate to that. And I think it doesn't hurt to just say, I'm here, what can I do, what can I offer you right now, like that would be helpful in terms of the learning. So I mean that's kind of like been our approach. And my specific approach is just you know providing and knowing that like they'll get to it when they can get to it, in their own time, because again, as I mentioned earlier, some family members are essential workers. So it's not that the parent does not want to help their kid at the time you're calling. If you have a synchronous learning situation, it may need to be asynchronous for that specific family or circumstance, because perhaps the family member is working in the health field and they can only help their child at 7 o'clock in the evening. I'm not going to be available. I mean, I might be able to answer a text, but like they know that they can talk to me the next day or send me a text, So there's so many different situations.
Definitely.
Just got to balance that. And as SPED teachers, that is what we do all day. We are flexible, we are adaptable, and we're just extending that accommodating and adapting to the family. Not just
I think we all need T-shirts that say we're flexible and adaptable. I think that's what we need to do. Like, we're flexible and we're adaptable. It's completely true. If there are other tips for participating in remote IEP meetings, like the one about the Google form, please drop them into the chat and share them with us. I love that you mention that people are doing the best that they can where they are right now. And I think it's really key that we are having those conversations with parents and telling them it's okay. Like, we understand that, and we're not going to stop providing services to your child if you're not able to participate today in learning. And I think that's really important that parents feel comfortable with that right now. So, and that sort of turns to writing goals a little bit, because right now we're in a weird place, right? We're in a weird place where we're writing goals for students, and some of them are goals that are very specific to being in person. So, Lauren has been talking to me. We were talking the other day as we were talking about this webinar, and we were talking about going back to benchmarks. And I was very excited about the idea because I always loved that's when I was doing IEP meetings, when I was leading them. I was always about the benchmarks, whether or not they need to be there. It's this stepping stone thing. And I think right now it's even more important. And Lauren, what does that look like for you right now?
Yeah, so I also had this conversation with some other teachers, and often you'll hear about like writing smart goals, and so like that one, the A part of the SMART goal is attainable, right? And so we are having a conversation about, okay, well, given the reality, like what's going to be attainable, like how is this going to affect how I, set the goal? And I think my advice around it is that we really shouldn't be lowering the expectation. Like we should really be thinking about what is the child capable of, what is their potential. And obviously we want to make goals that are informed like based on data that we have. But like, I don't know. I feel like some of the things from this experience are you can, take observable notes and whatnot, but at the same time, it's such a weird situation that we shouldn't also be penalizing a kid based on this. Like we know what kids' potentials are. And so I like the idea of doing the benchmark. I always write benchmarks into my goal because I can take different, like I can chunk different skills and address what a student needs to again meet the overall goal. So what I often do is I look at like where the kid is at. I talk to the general education teachers. I say, hey, like what gap skills do they have for the grade level curriculum? And so I do some benchmarks that are connected to what the teacher tells me. I think about, okay, where are some gap skills that are off grade level skills, and then prioritize, a couple of those objectives. So that will make it a little bit easier. However, learning is going to look, because then you can chunk, okay, I have 5 objectives or 6 objectives. Okay, we're going to be focusing on like objectives 1, 2, and 4 right now in distance learning. So it does make it a little bit easier because then you're still servicing the overall goal in terms of the benchmarks.
And it's best practice. You're talking about best practice for writing goals, but it becomes like a dual planning tool. And that's why I have like the note up here about dual planning. It's this idea that you have your overall goal and then your objectives and your benchmarks. With the dual planning, it's sort of like, what are we planning on getting done throughout this child's annual learning, whatever that learning environment looks like? And right now, what is achievable in the moment? What are we focused on in the moment? And you had mentioned like social emotional learning is a big one right now that we need to be looking at. How are we supporting social emotional skills? And those are the places where dual planning is not as hard as we think it is. I think we think about it and think like, how am I going to do this in this moment? And I love the idea that we're keeping expectations high, but we're also looking about what's achievable right now. And I think too, it's worth noting that the federal guidance around if you can't provide particular services, that's hard to say out loud, particular services right now, there is guidance around compensatory services when things come back into play. So we're going to make sure that we're still serving those needs through compensatory services when kids come back, but we can do what we can do in the moment. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that idea of remote learning plans. I had sort of brought this to in the beginning. Some districts and states right now are doing what they call a remote learning plan, and it doesn't replace the IEP, which is fascinating. It's an addendum of of a to the remote. I'm trying to figure out how to say this because I'm all tangled up in my words right now, which shows you that we are all in a different place right now with our brain space, right? So, what some districts are doing are adding these addendums of a remote or distance learning plan to all IEPs. So the IEP stands as it typically would. And then there's an addendum, which is here's what services look like right now in this moment of distance learning. Here's what we're going to focus on. Here are literally the services we're going to provide, the accommodations that stay in place, and how we're going to serve the needs of the student right now in this moment. And I think it's important to note that these are not plans that replace the IEP. They go side by side with the IEP. I think we all know that we're in a place right now where learning's going to be different for a while, and we need to be thinking about how are we serving those needs throughout time. Having remote learning plans has been a really interesting thing to see because it means when you go back into school, if for some reason we go back into a phase of distance learning, there's a plan that you can turn to already in place with the IEP. I think it's really important too to make sure that families understand the intent of a remote learning plan, that it's not to replace the IEP. It's not to say we're not going to provide services. It's to say we want to make sure we have a plan to provide services. We want to know that everybody knows what that's going to look like in this moment. And if at right now, if in other some districts are doing this some ways and other districts are doing it other ways, I think it's important to check in with your district to see what their policy is. But it's also to say, like, this is not replacing the IEP in a way that if you say, I can't do this part of the distance learning plan right now, that the parents are not refusing services. And in my school district where I live, they've been very clear in saying, if you decline some of the services right now because as a family that's not where you are, you're not able to do this, it does not mean that you're declining the IEP. And I think that's huge to make sure you are able to answer that with confidence and check in with your district and see what procedures need to happen around that.
Yeah.
We're still checking the chat box, by the way. So if you have thoughts or questions or anything like that, we want to
I
make
would
sure.
also say some states are calling it like different things, like, just like the present level of performance has like many different names.
Right.
But the remote learning plans are sometimes called like sometimes they're called temporary learning plans in some states, or like a continuous learning plan, or a distance learning plan, or a contingency plan. So there's lots of different names, but it's very similar to like, the characteristics of what Amanda described. And then something that I have been thinking about a little bit, and again, because it's an individualized IEP, is thinking about my students who have been able to log on and do work on the computer, is just trying to think about digital literacy skills and like the way that I can embed that into goals for some of my kids, because I see that there is some potential to build some skill sets there. So that's been like the wheels have been turning a little bit as I've like been goal planning for kids.
That's that flexibility and adaptability in action right there. It's that how do we make this a teachable moment, I think is really something. Any other tips that you out there have for us on writing goals and remote learning plans? I never realized how much wait time sounds like when you're like going live. It's quite a those 5 seconds are quite a bit. I'm going to just, like, leave that question open and make sure that people have the opportunity to let us know in the chat as it comes through. And we're actually at that time. We wanna make sure that you have questions. If you have questions, that you can get them answered. If you have comments that you would love to share with the group, please do that. Um, I was joking earlier that, this is the moment where we just sort of sit back and let you share all your wisdom with us. So please start sharing all your wisdom with us so we can then put it into practice. And while you're thinking about all those things you want to ask us, I just want to share a few more resources that we have worked with our Understood Fellows to put together on Understood. One of them is this Notes from a First-Time Distance Learning Teacher. It's a fantastic piece about what it's like to do this. What is it like? How are you doing this? How are you making it through? How are you providing distance learning in an environment that you've never done it before? Online best practices to use with for teachers to use with students. There's also a piece that we did, which is sort of best UDL practices. So how are you really building in accessibility into everything you're doing? I'm going to name a piece that's not on here that I absolutely love that Morin wrote for us, which is about coping with her own coronavirus anxiety while she's teaching. And I loved it. I thought it was so honest and just so vulnerable, and I really appreciate that you were able to share that with us too. So I appreciate everyone joining us today, and we can always pop back in and answer questions in the group as they come up. Should we give them just one more minute and make sure we've got all the questions that we need? Lauren, last thoughts that you want to share before we head out into the world again? Well,
into my house.
Words, literally distantly.
I think that reflection is a big piece as a teacher. I can definitely say that as a national word teacher, reflect, reflect, reflect. And so, we have the pedagogy of how we're teaching, right? And the process of how we're doing things. And an IEP meeting is, it's a process. And so I try to reflect afterward, okay, like what went well and what did I learn? And what am I going to do better for next time? Given that, I'm doing this in a new setting. But then I also, again, remember like that having the empathy and the flexibility, the adaptability in a meeting is key. And those are still values that, can transcend in person and to a virtual space. So I try to like anchor myself in that, as well as just the opportunities that and for conversations that this can bring about UDL. I know a lot of teachers don't know enough about universal design for learning, and there's a lot of potential of the ways that we do online learning to bring UDL into focus, because the online platforms, a lot of them do have accessibility features, whether like you are aware of them or not. And I think that they can be helpful for all students, whether the students have IEPs or special needs or learning or thinking differences. It doesn't matter. It's about how you as the adult or you as the child or whoever is getting onto the online platform, how do you want to like interact with the platform, and how do you want to take in the information? Like when I'm on Google Hangouts, sometimes, like I think Amanda was mentioning earlier, like I do not like auditory processing. Like I just can't. Anytime someone's telling me on the phone their number, I have to like repeat it back to them. I almost tune out. I just can't. I can't take the information in as well as if it's like I'm visually seeing it. So I always just use the Google Meet or Google Hangout like function of captions. Do I need captions? No, not necessarily.
Oh,
But
I would interrupt and say yes, because you're saying you do. It's an accommodation.
I know. Right. Like, and it's there for me. And that's how I choose to interact with the content that's in front of me to my high, like it's going to benefit me to the highest maximum benefit. So I think that, I think that there are some features embedded in these platforms that can definitely push these conversations around UDL, hopefully forward.
Definitely. I'm gonna Megan Gross. Hi, Megan. Actually, say hi to Megan. Is asking us if there are resources for parents on how to participate in a virtual IEP meeting or short videos that would be helpful for teachers to send to families. I actually found a resource just a couple of days ago that was put out by IDEA Works on Parent Center Hub, that had a tremendous amount of like a quick tip sheet and some videos that we can send to parents. Megan, I'm going to make sure to put that link in for you after the chat, because I can't multitask and do it at the same time. Speaking of accommodation, I can't grab it and do it at the same time. But I did see that, and it was really helpful to realize that there are visuals that we can send parents at the same time, and I'll make sure to get that out there. I think it's a great question. Thank you for asking. Thank you all for joining us today. And I think we're just going
Yes.
to, this was great. We appreciate your time. And we appreciate everything you're doing. Happy end of your Teacher Appreciation Week. So thank you
Yeah.
all. We'll see you soon.